All right, let's dive right into this explainer, because today we are looking at, honestly, one of the most incredible paradoxes in all of literary and spiritual history. We're talking about Jalal ad-Din Muhammad Rumi, a man whose words were written over 700 years ago, yet somehow they feel like they were written yesterday, literally, specifically for us.
So it really is a fascinating question, right? I mean, how does an Islamic scholar and jurist, born way back in 1207 in a place called Balkh, which is in present-day Afghanistan, somehow become one of the best-selling poets in the United States today? Like, what exactly is it about his words that cuts right through time, geography, and culture to just completely dominate modern bookshelves, pop music, and even our social media feeds? Well, to really understand the poetry, we first have to understand the journey of the man himself. Section 1, The Poet of the Soul, A Life in Migration. So, Rumi's early life was completely defined by movement and upheaval. When the very real threat of the Mongol invasions loomed over Central Asia, his family had to pack up and flee. They journeyed through major bustling cities like Baghdad, Mecca, and Damascus before finally putting down roots in Konya, which is in modern-day Turkey. But this wasn't just a flight for physical safety. It was actually a profound intellectual migration. Rumi was exposed to this massive, wildly diverse spectrum of scholarly and spiritual traditions that absolutely laid the groundwork for his later genius. Section 2. The Reed Flute Song, the Masnavi Overture. And this brings us right to one of his absolute most defining works, a famous poem known as the Song of the Reed, or Ni no Ma in Persian. This piece actually serves as the overture, the prologue, essentially, to his massive, epic, 6-volume masterpiece, the Masnavi. Let's look a bit closer at the imagery he uses here, because it really sets up his entire worldview. And this brilliantly illustrates how Rumi uses a really dense central metaphor to basically decode the human condition. He compares the human soul to a reed flute that's experiencing this deep, primordial separation. Just think about it for a second. A reed flute only makes its beautiful, haunting, kind of crying sound because it has literally been cut away from its home, the reed bed. And that reed bed represents God, or our ultimate divine origin. As Rumi famously wrote, the music and crying is the soul's longing to return to its source. He takes this incredibly simple, vivid image of a weeping flute and uses it to express just a massive spiritual idea. It means that all of our human restlessness, all of our deep, unexplainable longing, and our constant search for love, it all ultimately stems from this primordial separation from the divine. We are the flute, right? Crying out, longing to go back to the reed bed. But to reach his own ultimate spiritual peak, Rumi had to go through a pretty profound transformation of his own. Section 3, Shams and Transformation, Meeting the Mystic. Now, this is where the story completely shifts. Because every hero's journey has a catalyst, right? And for Rumi, that ultimate catalyst was a wandering Persian mystic. Let's see how this whole thing unfolded. Okay, so 1207, he's born. But jump ahead with me to November 1244. Rumi is, at this point, a highly respected, very traditional scholar and jurist in Konya. And then he meets this wandering mystic named Shams of Tabriz. And man, their connection was just electric. Rumi essentially abandoned his students, dropped his scholarly duties, and spent months in deep, intense spiritual conversation with Shams. Shams completely unlocked Rumi's inner poet. He transformed him from this serious, learned teacher into an ecstatic lover of God. But look at 1248. Just 4 years later, Shams vanishes permanently. He was likely murdered, and this left Rumi utterly, completely devastated. Now, what's really interesting about this quote is how perfectly it captures the ultimate lesson Shams left behind. It opens, "I have been knocking from the inside." See, Rumi realized, through the just unimaginable pain of losing his greatest spiritual companion, that the divine presence he was so desperately searching for out in the world, that presence he felt so strongly in Shams, was actually already right there within himself. 40,000. That is a massive number, and it represents the pouring out of verses in his incredible work, the Divan-e Shams-e Tabrizi. Rumi's intense grief and his divine realization just exploded into this absolute torrent of pure creativity. As he wrote in the Divan, "I was dead, then alive, weeping, then laughing. The power of love came into me, and I became fierce like a lion." And honestly, here's the most beautiful part of the whole thing. Rumi actually stopped citing his poetry with his own name. He started citing those poems with Shams' name instead. It was his beautiful way of declaring that their souls had become so totally merged, there was no longer any separation between them at all. This deep spiritual maturity eventually culminated in his absolute magnum opus, the Masnavi, which many scholars often call the Quran in Persian. But here's the thing. This incredible 6-book epic took roughly 15 years to write, and it absolutely wouldn't exist without Hussam al-Din Chalabi. Hussam was Rumi's incredibly devoted disciple and scribe. Rumi would literally just dictate the verses aloud, and Hussam would feverishly write them down, read them back for refinement, and really provide the constant, unwavering encouragement Rumi needed to finish a staggering 25,000 verses.
Section 4. The Guest House Modern Mindfulness. So, you might be wondering, how exactly does a 13th century Sufi mystic's philosophy translate to our super loud, chaotic 21st century lives? Well, the crazy thing is, it translates surprisingly well. Let's break down one of his most famous poems, The Guest House, into a really practical, modern exercise.
So the crucial point is right here. This is where his work becomes incredibly practical for us today. Rumi was actually teaching a profound form of emotional intelligence centuries before the term even existed. Step 1, treat your mind as a guest house. Step 2, welcome every unexpected emotion. Step 3, view pain as a guide from beyond. Instead of fighting your sadness or trying to run away from your anxiety, Rumi urges us to literally invite them in, to sit with them, and to understand that every single feeling has been sent as a guide from beyond to teach you something about yourself. It's just an incredibly powerful, actionable tool for everyday modern mindfulness.
Section 5. A Legacy Beyond Ideas, Global Impact. Because Rumi didn't just write some nice poetry, he created a massive ripple effect that has crossed borders, languages, and centuries to fundamentally shape the world we live in today. Let's move along and see how this builds, because just look at the sheer breadth of his impact here. We have contemporary poet Coleman Barks, whose really accessible English translations introduced Rumi to literally millions in the West. You have pop icons like Madonna actively integrating his verses into their modern pop music. Historically, Rumi founded the Mevlevi order, which you probably know universally as the Whirling Dervishes, whose ecstatic dance physically embodies his teachings on divine love. Today, he stands as this incredible global symbol of interfaith harmony, proving once and for all that the search for the divine and the human experience of love are completely, universally shared. I want to leave you with perhaps his absolute most globally quoted verse. Out beyond ideas of wrongdoing and right-doing, there is a field. I'll meet you there. It's just a beautiful call to dissolve the walls and barriers we constantly build between each other. It reminds us that all of our intellectual knowledge must eventually, ultimately, surrender to direct experience and to love. So my question to you, as we wrap up this explainer, is, as you navigate your own complex life today, what does your field look like? And who are you willing to meet there?